even impeaching Trump apparently is not enough. We had Speaker Pelosi now apparently telling senior Democrats she'd like to see Trump behind bars. Based on no actual crime, she wants a political opponent locked up in prison. That happens in banana republics, beyond despicable behavior. And by the way, they would literally turn, in many ways, the USA into a country we would no longer recognize.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Yeah, because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
The irony meter is like one of those at Chernobyl when they were walking in and it was just going off the charts. Welcome back to Morning Joe. It's Friday, June 7th. Still with us, we have NBC News correspondent Heidi Przybyla, the host of Saturday Night Politics on MSNBC, Donnie Deutsch, and joining the conversation, national political correspondent for NBC News and MSNBC, author of The Red and the Blue, Steve Kornacki, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist and associate editor of The Washington Post, and MSNBC political analyst Eugene Robinson, and the co-founder of Axios, Mike Allen. Joe and Mika will be back on Monday. Gene, we didn't even play the incessant lock her up chants at every single campaign rally. Exactly. And by the way, not just at campaign rallies, but into his presidency.
Exactly. When Hannity was giving that rant, I could barely hear it because in my head it was drowned out by those chants of lock her up, which were led by, among others, Michael Flynn at the convention. But yeah. I digress. It's just incredible.
You have to almost stand in awe, Donnie, at the complete lack of shame to say that's a banana republic move to say somebody should be in jail after what the president called for 3 years.
You know, Sean Hannity personally was actually a nice guy. It's performance art. I mean, that's literally what it is. You have to learn, you know, on that stuff, you can't let your hair go on fire because it's so absurd. It's so ridiculous that I think Fox News in so many ways, bar a few of the anchors there, it's theater. It's not even news anymore.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, with the headstones of fallen American heroes behind him, President Trump yesterday unleashed insulting and disparaging comments about Democratic congressional leaders and a recipient of the Purple Heart, Robert Mueller.
I think she's a disgrace. I actually don't think she's a talented person. I've tried to be nice to her because I would have liked to have gotten some deals done. She's incapable of doing deals. She's a nasty, vindictive, horrible person. Let me ask Nancy, why is her district a drug needles all over the place? It's the most disgusting thing, what she's allowed to happen to her district, with needles, with drug addicts, with people living in the middle of the streets, with people living on the sidewalk. You can't go. She ought to focus on that because she's a disaster. And she made a statement. It was a horrible,
when you were
vicious statement while I'm overseas. Now, if I made any statement about anybody, it would be like a big head. Why would he do that when he's overseas? She did it when she is a terrible person. And I'll tell you, her name, it's Nervous Nancy, because she's a nervous wreck. They thought their good friend Bobby Mueller was going to give them a great report, and he came out with a report with 13 horrible, angry Democrats who were totally biased against me.
Do you mind if he testifies still? Before you said you didn't care, Mueller testifies.
Let me tell you. He made such a fool out of himself the last time because what people don't report is the letter he had to do to straighten out his testimony, because his testimony was wrong. But Nancy Pelosi, I call her Nervous Nancy. Nancy Pelosi doesn't talk about it. Nancy Pelosi's a disaster, okay? She's a disaster. I will tell you, the more successful we become, the more angry people like Nancy Pelosi, who don't have what it takes. The opponent, who shouldn't have even been allowed to run, you know, she happens to be a crooked person, so her name was very appropriate. We have crying Chuck Schumer, who's a disaster, by the way. He's a total political, you know, jerk.
Gene, you almost can't hear most of what he's saying because you're looking at the 9,300 headstones.
Exactly. Look at that backdrop. I mean, who thought, what advanced person looked at that shot and checked it out and didn't and wasn't just aghast at the thought that the president would give that sort of interview in that sort of setting. Inappropriate is a word that doesn't even begin to come close to what it's just appalling. It's absolutely appalling. He's speaking about, by the way, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the highest-ranking woman in the history of the American government.
So let's make clear so the viewers know that the context of this as well was that right before that, Nancy Pelosi had said in a closed-door meeting that Trump should be put in after he leaves. So he was responding to that. But what this shows is that even in such a solemn setting like this and overseas, that there is no slight, no insult that is too petty not to respond to. It was just a day or two before this that Trump was meeting with the royal family and Theresa May and tweeting at 1 in the morning about Bette Midler. So there's just not that kind of self-control and awareness that he can just take a pass, basically, on one of these criticisms. That is really actually pretty petty.
But it's getting, I mean, it's getting worse. I think the Bette Midler
I think this was one of the
especially.
starkest
To your
illustrations
point-
of that.
To your point, I think it is going to be interesting as we get closer to 2020. Obviously, Steve, this is going to bleed into you. I do think there's a wear-out factor. Not with his base, not with the 37, 38%. I do think the bag of tricks that made him so fresh in 2016, calling people names, this whole bit that was so shocking and fresh. I've given the analogies. The difference between season 1 of The Apprentice and Celebrity Apprentice season 7. It feels old and tired. And I think the polls are going to show that as we get into 2020.
But also, if you look at the substance of what he's saying, he's railing against Robert Mueller, who, as I said, won the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star, a man who he says exonerated him.
Yes.
So make up your mind.
Yeah, exactly. Make up your mind. Is he like this horrible, incompetent person, or is he your friend who maybe kept you from getting impeached? I don't know. To prove your point, though, I've seen some figures that the impressions and reactions to his tweets, that figure